The Israeli government appears to have expanded the objectives of its war against Iran. Just why are they choosing now to reveal their true goals? And more importantly, is the U.S. going to back them up? Plus, we are going to talk about Vladimir Putin's deputy, who may have just accidentally revealed that Russian losses in Ukraine are unsustainable. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so check it out. According to the latest updates, Israel has acknowledged that it now plans to eliminate the Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei after an Iranian missile strike targeted a hospital. This is coming from Israel's defense minister, saying that eliminating Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is one of the country's war goals. Now, one of the things that we have talked about on this channel is the fact that the choice of targets of Israel's strikes are not compatible with simply eliminating Iran's nuclear program, right? Doing so, right, would involve targeting nuclear scientists, nuclear facilities, and the air defenses and military infrastructure that guard them, as well as perhaps some military overseers of the program, right? Targeting the people and the things that allow the nuclear program to function. But there have been other targets that don't make sense if that's the objective. For example, targeting Iranian state media. Why would it be important to humiliate the regime with these strikes by targeting their ability to broadcast their propaganda to the population? It doesn't matter what you think the Iranian population believes about the strikes if they're targeted simply to eliminating a nuclear program. So that right there told us that the Israeli objectives were actually more broad ranging. And we're seeing that now, right? Diminishing the state's ability to communicate with the public is something that you do in preparation for regime change operations. And so the fact that now Israel is coming out explicitly and saying, actually, guys, we are here to take out the supreme leader of Iran is a huge expansion of the war's aims. And as we've also talked about, this feels a lot. Those of you that remember the Iraq War recall that this was kind of the process that this happened. It initially was simply a discrete war to remove Saddam Hussein's ability to manufacture weapons of mass destruction, what they called WMDs. It was never really specified which ones they were, biological or chemical weapons perhaps. But the fact is that it quickly morphed into a regime change war, then became about a nation building war, and eventually ended up being this preposterous bag of all tricks where the U.S. military's objectives ranged from supporting women's rights to building civil governance, facilitating elections, to fighting insurgents, to policing sectarian violence. It was just a smorgasbord of objectives. And when you try to do everything, it's the same thing as doing nothing at all because, well, that's how objectives work. You can't have infinity objectives. You have to choose one. And so the fact that this playbook appears to be running again worries me tremendously, particularly given that while Trump's saying he's still weighing whether to use bunker buster bombs in Iran and meet with advisors in the coming hours, this is literally contradicted by the earlier reports that Trump has approved plans to attack Iran, but not made the final decision. And what that means, for those of you that think that sounds contradictory, is that President Trump has been presented by the military probably with a menu of options that say, listen, here are all the military intervention options, ranging likely from extreme things like a ground invasion all the way down to extremely minor interventions like providing logistics support to the Israeli military. And Trump has said, okay, of this range of options, this is the one that I want. But the question is, when and more importantly, should we do this at all, right? And so this is sort of a good policy for decision making to simply say, listen, let's come up with the widest menu of options, and then we're going to pare them down to things that we consider aligned with our goals and objectives. And then you simply have to make a yes or no decision based on these objectives. But the fact is that it's President Trump. So he's always sort of changing and shifting his stances, his viewpoints. He's notoriously capricious in this way. And so the fact is that even though he agreed to something, he approved a military plan, and the military is likely moving their troops and aircraft into position to execute on the approved plan, not for example, on a bunch of other plans. The fact that Trump may still be changing his mind is par for the course. Right now, one of the reasons that Israel is starting to talk more or explicitly say they want to effectively at least kill the Iranian supreme leader, is that Iran has reportedly targeted an Israeli hospital, and the Iranians are claiming, without really presenting any more meaningful evidence, that there were totally tanks under that hospital, which is, I think, probably what they believe is a troll, basically, against the Israelis who claim that there were militarized tunnels underneath hospitals in Gaza. So the fact that Iran is resorting to this kind of, it's not military objectives they're trying to achieve at this point. They're simply trying to achieve propaganda victories. But that in its own way may be part of the plan. But before we talk about that and the Iranian, the Iranian plan to mobilize the Muslim world, right? I wanted to mention that I want to actually take a sec and say a huge thank you to the folks at Combat Vet News. Now, those of you guys that are members know that Combat Vet News functions like a Patreon, right? There's a bunch of videos that YouTube refuses to let me show you, particularly reactions and analysis of the GoPro footage, combat footage coming to us from the front lines. So every Tuesday and Thursday, a new video drops there of the latest uncensored combat footage that we can get our hands on, including sometimes footage sent to me directly from units on the front lines. But the other thing that you guys may or may not know is that I have we're welcoming our second child into the world probably this week. But when you're a YouTuber and you don't make videos, you don't make money, right? And so you hope everything goes smoothly. But if things go sideways, right, not only would I not be able to make videos, but it would be a time when that income would be the most important. So the fact is that you guys have my back and enable me to do this. And I just want to say thank you, because it's so important to my family to know that even if I have to take a couple days off, that you guys are still going to have my back because you believe in what I'm doing. You believe in the fact that I'm out here speaking truth to power, even though it may make people uncomfortable. So again, thank you guys so much. All the members, not just the lieutenant and colonel tier folks that get the shout outs every video, but all of you guys. I see you. I appreciate you. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Okay. So I wanted to talk briefly about the danger of taking out the Iranian supreme leader. And the danger is that he is not just a military leader, right? The Iranian supreme leader is also considered the spiritual leader of the Shiite Muslim world. And if we can find a map here, you can see that Shiite countries, there's a lot of them, right? Let's see. Let's try to find it here. So here is a map of the Sunnis and Shiites throughout the world, kind of sorted. This is actually a pretty good one, I think. Yeah, here we go. So you can see the blue represents Shiites. So you can see literally wherever there are Shiites, there are essentially anti-Western insurgent movements. In fact, you can see the Iranians, almost entirely Shiite Muslims, with some Shiites bleeding into the Caucasus. But then you also have a large Shiite population in central Afghanistan. You have some in Pakistan, and you have some here in the Arabian Peninsula, right, where the Houthis are notable for conducting operations. You also have Shiites in Lebanon, and of course, Shiite Muslims operating in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So you can see that while Sunnis are the majority, Shiites are their own pretty militant sect. And they all, like the way the Pope is both the head of the independent country called the Vatican, the Pope is also the head of the spiritual religion of Catholicism. That is the role that the Ayatollah plays in Iran. And this is a huge problem because the Ayatollah, if he were to be killed, that would be the equivalent of, again, I'm trying to think of an analogy. It'd be the equivalent of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, like kidnapping and killing the Pope, right? Not only like the Vatican would be mad, sure, but the Vatican has a limited ability to retaliate. But millions of Catholics around the world would be enraged at this brazen attack on their religious head. And so this is sort of the liability that the Israelis risk running. They risk Shiites in Iraq, Shiites in Yemen, Shiites in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Lebanon, all becoming militarized and attacking the West broadly, who they view as responsible for this killing of their leader. And again, Israel's defense minister says Iran's supreme leader, quote, can no longer be allowed to exist. And so the idea, right, is to pull the U.S. in. The idea seems to be, or maybe, that part of it is to pull the U.S. in on what they're told is a simple, small objective, such as, again, dismantling the Iranian nuclear program, and then sort of wag the dog, so to speak, and force the U.S. to suddenly say, oh, actually, you're a member of a regime change operation. This is really troubling given the fact that the U.S. has effectively not successfully engaged in regime change operations done through this method of literally invading an otherwise stable regime, right? It failed in Iraq, it failed in Afghanistan, and it's probably going to fail here, right? There is no other Iraqi government ready to take over. Places where it does succeed are generally those in which an organic alternative government persistently exists for some time, right? An example would be Syria, right, where independent groups have governed portions of Syrian territory for a large number of years before they were able to sweep aside the regime. So this, I think, is the context in which you have to understand just how bad an idea this stuff is. Now, I wanted to talk a pivot into Europe and talk about an unusual statement by the Russian senior minister. In fact, this is an interview with CNN between the Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kellen, who was asked explicitly about Moscow's intentions in Ukraine and its ability to recruit enough soldiers to fulfill it. Kellen dismissed the $1 million number for casualties, but he did say, he said, I can tell you there hasn't been 1 million casualties, but he said there's definitely, I don't know the actual number of casualties. They added, but however, about 600,000 soldiers were fighting in Ukraine, a number which matches Ukrainian estimates from January, which is interesting because it tells us that we can probably believe, given the Ukrainian estimates of the number of soldiers who are alive are confirmed as accurate now, we can estimate that Ukraine's rate of the number of casualties probably also pretty accurate. But what's more interesting is that in June 2024, 12 months ago, Vladimir Putin said that there were 700,000 troops in Ukraine. So then in December of 2023, he said there were 617,000, right? So you can see now that actually, even compared to December 2023, literally a year and a half ago, the Kremlin has fewer troops. If their goal is to win through overwhelming numbers, the fact that they are 100,000 troops short of their high watermark is itself a sign that Russia is not offsetting its losses. And Kellen claims that the Russians are recruiting 50 to 60,000 soldiers a month. He says the volunteers are coming, recruiting, posting, and they would like to get engaged in Ukraine. We've talked about the fact that this is probably an exaggerated number. This is probably like their best month of the year. The more realistic number is probably about half of that. But what's the most troubling is that, again, despite the fact that some of these casualties, right, some Russian casualties simply returned to the battlefield, right? But despite that, and despite what they claim is a preposterously high recruitment number, they are still losing troops. In fact, having 100,000 fewer troops in Ukraine than they had in just 6 months ago is a sign that the Russian army may actually be kind of in free fall in terms of its recruitment ability. And this makes sense because in those 6 months, we've seen the bonus payments that Russia is making rise tremendously. And as a general principle, if you are meeting your recruitment goals, you do not need to increase your bonus payments, certainly not faster than the rate of inflation. And so the interesting part, right,
is that Western analysts estimate, right, perhaps that the Russians are losing between 35 and 45,000 people per month. And one Russia team lead for the Institute of the Study of War says that they're probably recruiting enough to push back that number. But again, when you look at these numbers, if that were true, the number of Russian troops in Ukraine would be rising, but it's not. It's falling. And the fact is that, as we've always pointed out on this channel, a lot of times we look at the battlefield and we say, oh, well, Russia is seizing territory, right? But when you look at the value, the rate at which they're seizing territory, the cost they incur to do so, and most importantly, the actual territory itself that they are taking, you see that it's a lot of empty farmland at a cost of literally every single month, probably about a small town. Literally, you're talking about Russia losing a city's worth of people every 3 months. So this is a sign, I think, that it's possible that the Ukrainians, while they are under strain, they also understand that they're fighting an existential war, whereas Vladimir Putin is fighting a war of choice, right? He's not going to institute a broad draft. He's not going to institute broad mobilization. And so he is simply banking on the fact that Ukraine will run out of steam before Russia does. But that increasingly looks like it may not be the case. Anyway, a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News, folks like Peter Fucci, Dan M, Petchatoru, Henry Russer, Otis Guy, Call Chris Rossi, AL90, Sergei Zinchenko, D Stewart, James Porsche, B Hemmerling, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. If you want to become a member, that link is in the description as always, and I will catch each and every one of you guys in the next one. Thanks so much. See ya. Cheers.